You ever drive across the country expecting horses and end up face to face with bureaucracy wearing a red vest? That's what happened when I rolled up to visit my Grandpa Walter in Crestwood Hollow. I hadn't seen him in a couple months, and I figured I'd get a little peace, a little porch time, maybe learn how to saddle a horse. Instead, I got an industrial-grade metal gate, a big old private HOA property sign, and a woman named Priscilla Knox who looked like she moonlighted as a parking violation. She had the posture of a hall monitor and the smile of someone who'd tasted power and never gone back to sugar. And there she was, blocking the dirt path we always called Cain's Lane, arguing with my 75-year-old grandpa like she had just declared war on hay bales. Leave a comment below and let us know where you're watching from if you love wild, true-feeling stories packed with twists, justice, and just the right amount of HOA chaos. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Tomorrow's story is even more jaw-dropping, and trust me, the surprises coming next, you won't want to miss them. Now, Walter Cain is not a man who blinks. He's the kind of retired mechanical engineer who once built his own rototiller just because he didn't like the ones at Home Depot. So when Priscilla started waving a stack of printed-off legalese that smelled like toner and attitude, I knew we were headed for a showdown. "This path belongs to the Crestwood Hollow HOA," she said, as if she were reciting scripture. Grandpa didn't even flinch. "Ma'am, I've been driving this path for 6 months, and it goes straight through the middle of my land. Unless your map came from a fortune cookie, I'd double-check those lines." I pulled out my phone. Something told me this would end up being the kind of story people needed to see to believe. Priscilla wasn't impressed. She narrowed her eyes, clearly used to neighbors folding faster than patio furniture at a garage sale. "According to these surveys, the path is part of community property, and your ranch is in violation of our guidelines. Rustic fencing, livestock presence, non-conforming architecture." Grandpa just stared at her like she was trying to outlaw fresh air. "Are we maintaining standards or installing dictatorships?" he asked, his voice calm but with that edge he got when someone tried to outlogic him without a license. Because if fences are the HOA's new frontier, then this is going to be one wild subdivision. And then, in true Walter Cain fashion, he turned to the neighbor across the street. "Ralph," he said, "you still got those boundary markers from last month?" That's when I realized this wasn't going to be one of those polite disagreements that ends with muffins and passive-aggressive emails. This was the beginning of something bigger, something with fences and fake forms and that strange tone HOA presidents get after too many potlucks with power. And Grandpa? He wasn't just defending a driveway. He was about to turn a dirt path into a constitutional crisis. "Reed," he said to me, the way he used to when I was a kid and he'd figured out how to fix something no one else could, "I think it's time this gate learned some manners." The sun hit the top of the fence just right, casting a long shadow across Cain's Lane, and all I could think was, well, this is going to get good. If you've ever dealt with HOA nonsense, comment below and tell me where you're watching from. Because what happened next? It makes David vs. Goliath look like a friendly town hall meeting with snacks. And if you're new here, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe. You're not going to want to miss what Grandpa does with that gate. By the time I came back 2 days later, Grandpa had done what only a retired engineer with too much free time and a taste for mischief could have pulled off. Where the HOA's fence once stood, now sat a handcrafted toll booth painted in cheerful shades of yellow and blue. It looked like a lemonade stand had married a county fair ride and had an access control baby. Above it hung a hand-carved sign that read, "Boone Access Plaza, $5.00 per entry. Exact change, appreciate." I didn't know whether to laugh or salute. There was even a sun-faded lawn chair inside where Grandpa sat like a toll-taking king, clipboard in hand, cowboy hat tilted like he was ready to reenact the Boston Tea Party. And just like that, the game had officially changed. Because nothing makes bureaucracy sweat like a senior citizen with a plan and a Sharpie. The first customer was predictable. Priscilla Knox returned in her white SUV, tires spitting gravel like she was late for a neighborhood coup. She rolled up to the gate without slowing down, assuming the world still operated on her imaginary bylaws. The sensors Grandpa had installed, triggered by vehicle weight, kicked into gear. With a soft whir and a sharp clank, the mechanical gate slammed shut inches from her bumper. Her mouth dropped like she'd just discovered gravity. "This is extortion!" she shouted, still gripping the steering wheel like she could outmuscle physics. Grandpa leaned out of his booth window as casually as if he were asking about the weather. "Ma'am, this here's a private road, and the toll is $5. You can pay cash. I haven't upgraded to Venmo yet." She stared at him like he was speaking pirate code, but her engine idled, and her power had hit a mechanical wall. She tried easing forward. The gate held. She tried backing up and launching again. The gate held faster. The sensors were calibrated tighter than an IRS audit. She even tried honking like the gate might feel intimidated by sound. Meanwhile, I filmed from the side, trying not to cackle. It was a glorious demonstration of Newtonian law meeting HOA delusion. "You're violating federal commerce regulations," she yelled, slapping the steering wheel like it owed her back pay. Grandpa pulled out the county-approved property surveys Ralph had helped him file and pressed them to her window like holy writ. "According to county records, this path cuts straight through my land, so unless you've got a better map, or $5, you might want to reconsider your route." That moment was more satisfying than a perfect click on a seatbelt buckle, and just like that, the neighborhood had a new sheriff. One with a folding chair and mechanical genius. Then came Ralph, pulling up in his restored '67 Mustang like he was arriving at a parade he didn't know he'd been crowned king of. He didn't hesitate, slapped a crisp $5 bill on Grandpa's counter and asked, "Do I get a receipt, or do I just ride away free?" Grandpa, never one to skip an opportunity for flair, scribbled on a napkin, "Toll paid, welcome to freedom." Ralph held it up like a badge of honor and drove through with a nod, gate rising with perfect timing like the curtain at a Broadway show. Folks started talking. Some whispered complaints about tolls and road access, but more people just seemed happy to see Priscilla finally get a taste of her own paperwork. And you could feel it in the air. That subtle shift when people realize control is only powerful until someone questions it out loud. The best part? Grandpa didn't gloat. He didn't raise his voice. He just operated that toll booth like a man serving the public interest one $5.00 fee at a time. It wasn't about money. It was about making a point and doing it with class. As neighbors drove by, many slowed down just to say thank you. Others handed Grandpa baked goods with their toll. I swear, someone even tried to pay in eggs. The gate, the booth, the receipts, it all became a kind of suburban protest art, a quiet rebellion against HOA nonsense that looked a lot like common sense dressed up in engineering. And as Grandpa said to one neighbor who called it a circus, "This ain't extortion, ma'am. It's a user experience upgrade. You want to stick around for what happens when Priscilla brings reinforcements? O's coming, and it's better than coffee and reality TV combined." Just when I thought Grandpa's toll booth had peaked in creativity, he rolled out something so brilliantly simple it felt like justice with a barcode. The Boone VIP Pass. For $50, 0 cents a month, members got unlimited access through the gate, a laminated card with a gold horse emblem, and what Grandpa called priority wave-through privileges. It wasn't just a toll, it was a statement. Folks who'd spent years feeling micromanaged by the HOA suddenly had a new club to belong to. The laminated cards became social currency overnight. One guy even punched a hole in his and wore it on a lanyard like a badge of honor. And while the passes weren't mandatory, they sure made people feel like they were choosing a side. And oh boy, sides were definitely being chosen. See, not everyone liked the VIP idea. A group of Priscilla's loyalists, the ones who treated HOA rules like they were handed down from the mountaintop, started getting loud. One neighbor called Grandpa the fence bandit in the neighborhood Facebook group. Another wrote an anonymous letter accusing him of gate-based intimidation. But here's the thing about HOA fanatics. They're really good at filing complaints, but not great at reading fine print. Grandpa had every legal right to operate that gate. And the more noise they made, the more VIP passes he sold. It was like watching someone try to put out a fire with gasoline and a clipboard. And yet, the community was starting to split, not just over a fence, but over something deeper. identity, belonging, and whether freedom or order felt more neighborly. That's when Maggie Field stepped in. Maggie had always been the quiet one. She wore windbreakers in summer and walked her rescue dog like she was gathering evidence on the sidewalk. Turns out, she used to do freelance reporting for a local weekly back in the day, and once the HOA drama reached boiling point, her curiosity kicked in like a retired bloodhound catching a scent. She asked Grandpa if she could look into the HOA's financial reports. Public records, technically. Don't need a warrant, she told him. Just a working printer and caffeine, and when Maggie starts asking questions, you'd better believe someone's going to get nervous. She called me later that week and said, "Wes, you ever wonder why Priscilla keeps raising HOA fees, but no one's seen a single improvement?" According to Maggie's notes, and I've seen 'em, she keeps folders like a prosecutor. Priscilla had increased HOA dues 3 times in the last year. Each time she cited legal counsel fees and property maintenance modernization. But no one had seen a lawyer, and the only thing modernized was the coffee pot in the HOA meeting room. Maggie couldn't find a trace of expenditure beyond vague invoices marked external consulting. It was like trying to track a magician's rabbit. Every time you thought you saw something, it disappeared into another spreadsheet. "If the HOA's clean," Maggie said, tapping a stack of stapled documents on her kitchen table, "why do their papers smell like bleached and excuses?" She wasn't wrong. Something was rotting behind those manicured lawns and neutral-toned HOA newsletters, and it was starting to stink up the whole cul-de-sac. The divide in the neighborhood grew sharper with every new VIP pass issued. You could spot the lines like paint on pavement, driveways with VIP stickers and ones with hand-scrawled protest signs about gate tyranny. The clubhouse that used to host potlucks became a ghost town, and neighbors who used to share garden tips now shared glares. Some said Grandpa was the problem. Others said he was the cure. But what no one could deny was this: the toll booth hadn't created the division, it had revealed it. Like sunlight on a cracked foundation, it showed people exactly what their community had become. And if you think that's where it peaked, stick around. Because the deeper Maggie dug, the closer she got to a truth that was bigger than tolls, fences, or HOA tantrums. And trust me, Priscilla's mask was just starting to slip. It started with a manila envelope that looked important but smelled suspiciously like desperation. A courier showed up at the toll booth, handed it to Grandpa like he was delivering a summons to the king of a small island nation, and muttered something about urgent legal matters. Grandpa opened it right there with me filming, and what spilled out was not justice. It was a comedy sketch written in Times New Roman, a cease and desist letter signed by someone calling themselves Barrister J. Lawman, which might as well have been Attorney Mac Fake-esque. The letter threatened immediate legal repercussions for unauthorized toll transactions on shared communal ingress. Grandpa adjusted his reading glasses, blinked twice, and said, "Well, that's a whole lot of syllables for a pile of nonsense." Without even setting down his coffee, Grandpa flipped the letter over, checked the paper, and muttered, "Yep, inkjet, slight smudge, no watermark." Then he looked straight at my camera and said, "Wes, go ahead and record this for posterity." And like he was giving a cooking demo, he began fact-checking the letter line by line, calling out the grammar mistakes, the fake firm name, and the complete absence of a case number. Then, grinning, he slowly tore the paper into perfect, evenly spaced strips. "They could have at least sprung for legal-sized paper," he said. "If you're going to lie, put some production value behind it." I posted the video that night. By morning, it had 12,000 views and a comment section full of HOA war veterans cheering from the digital bleachers. But if you thought Priscilla was out of tricks, bless your optimistic heart. Her next move wasn't just petty, it was practically slander wearing business casual. That week, a new rumor swept through the neighborhood faster than free Costco samples. Grandpa was selling the land to a corporate developer to build a gas station and mini-mall. According to multiple sources, Priscilla and her bathroom mirror, construction was already planned and would include at least 15 retail spaces and a fast food drive-thru. People who'd been neutral up to that point started whispering behind fences. "I heard he's already signed." one neighbor told another, like they were gossiping about an affair, not a zoning disaster. Grandpa, meanwhile, just kept handing out VIP passes and nodding like a man watching toddlers pretend they were lawyers. Then came Raymond Shaw, the supposed representative from Greenline Urban Holdings, a name that sounded just believable enough if you said it with a straight face. Raymond showed up in a wrinkled suit, holding a clipboard and a cheap smile. "I'm here to confirm development timelines," he said, trying to shake Grandpa's hand like they were old pals. Grandpa didn't flinch. "Timelines for what, exactly?" he asked. Raymond launched into a rehearsed pitch about commercial investments and property leverage, all while mispronouncing easement and dodging every technical term like it owed him money. I was already filming. Grandpa leaned forward, steepling his fingers like a man about to make a turkey out of someone else's lies. "Tell me, Raymond, how's your grade differential holding up against the North Slope runoff?" Raymond blinked like a dial-up modem searching for signal. What followed was the verbal equivalent of a demolition. Grandpa fired off question after question about soil compression, utility access, stormwater plans, and Raymond looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. At one point, he dropped his clipboard and mumbled something about getting back to the office. Grandpa just stood there, arms crossed, waiting for him to admit the obvious. "Son," he said as Raymond speed-walked to his car, "she printed a zoning permit on the back of a Walgreens receipt. I'm insulted." And he was. Not angry, not shaken, just disappointed. Because if you're going to try to con a man who once designed industrial hydraulics, at least bring a real blueprint. That evening, Maggie swung by with a copy of Raymond's so-called development letter. It was riddled with typos and included a return address to a P.O. box at a defunct ice cream shop. But it wasn't just about catching the fraud. It was about showing the neighborhood what manipulation looked like in daylight. Maggie uploaded a side-by-side breakdown of the real zoning process versus the fake forms Priscilla had circulated. And let me tell you, the comparison hit like a frying pan to the logic center. Neighbors who'd been skeptical started texting me, "Wait, this was all fake?" "Yes, Linda." All of it. Every page. And while the HOA faithful clung to their bylaws like they were scripture, the rest of us were waking up to a truth that smelled less like rules and more like rot. And you'll want to stay tuned, because if you thought the paper war ended here, oh no. Priscilla hadn't even begun her final act of HOA theater. After a week of whisper campaigns, drive-by stares, and HOA group texts hotter than a potluck crockpot, Grandpa decided it was time to clear the air, literally. He posted signs all over the neighborhood that read, "Open Ranch Walkthrough, come see for yourself. No fees, no speeches, just neighbors and facts." And wouldn't you know it, people came. Curiosity works faster than gossip when it's fueled by homemade lemonade and the chance to prove yourself right. Folks arrived with folded arms and skeptical faces, like they were entering enemy territory. But what they found wasn't a bulldozer or blueprints for a gas station. It was a humble property with horse stalls half-built, a tool shed in progress, and a big chalkboard titled "Future Riding Lessons for Local Kids." Grandpa wasn't hiding anything. He was building something. Midway through the tour, as we passed the stables, someone asked Grandpa why he'd picked this particular piece of land. He didn't get preachy, just looked out toward the pasture and said, "Because this is where my wife and I always planned to end up. She passed before we made it, but I came anyway. Figured one of us should live the dream." It got quiet after that. The kind of quiet that makes people shift their weight and avoid eye contact, because suddenly it wasn't about fences or permits or HOA newsletters. It was about something everyone in that town understood, holding on to something that mattered when the world tried to push you off course. That's when the ranch stopped being a rumor and started becoming real. Then Maggie, God bless her windbreaker soul, came through with a thunderbolt. She'd been digging through county records like a raccoon in a file cabinet and found the original subdivision plat. Turns out, the so-called community path was actually a private easement that had always belonged to the property Grandpa purchased. The HOA had been laying claim to land they never legally touched. It was like arguing over a driveway drawn in permanent marker on someone else's map. Maggie walked us through the papers like a substitute teacher with something to prove. "This here," she said, pointing to the plot lines, "that's Kane's land. Not communal, not shared, not up for HOA suggestion, and it always has been." Watching Priscilla's supporters squint at the documents like they were in a spelling bee for the first time was worth every second. And that was the turning point. One by one, neighbors started cracking. Some apologized, a few asked for VIP passes, one even brought over a pie with a sticky note that said, "Sorry for calling you the driveway dictator." The tension didn't evaporate overnight, but it did shift. People who once whispered now asked real questions. They weren't looking for someone to fight. They were looking for someone to believe. And Grandpa, with his flannel shirt and sun-worn hands, gave them something Priscilla never could: honesty without a script. The ranch wasn't just a battleground anymore. It was becoming a place of clarity, a reminder that truth, like good soil, takes time to reveal itself, but grows deep when it does. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills and the last neighbors walked back toward their cookie-cutter houses, Grandpa stood at the gate with me and said, "Funny how the loudest things in this town are fences and fear." He wasn't bitter, just observant, like he'd finally seen past the HOA noise to the heart of the matter. But if you think that meant Priscilla was done, oh, bless your heart. She hadn't learned a thing, and her next move was going to make the fake lawsuits look like amateur hour at a neighborhood barbecue. And trust me, you'll want to be front row for what's coming next. We knew it was only a matter of time before this circus needed a spotlight, so Maggie and I set up a live stream at the toll booth. Nothing fancy, just Grandpa, a fold-out table, and a stack of every phony document Priscilla had paraded around like sacred scrolls. The stream title, HOA Fraud, live from Boone Ranch. We figured a few dozen neighbors might tune in. What we didn't expect was over 500 viewers in under 10 minutes, the comments section lighting up like a 4th of July barbecue. Grandpa stood like a professor holding court, flipping through documents and calmly dismantling each lie with the surgical precision of a man who once reverse-engineered a snowblower for fun. "This one," he said, holding up a notice stamped urgent, misspells ordinance 3 times and quotes a zoning law from Arizona. "We're in Missouri, folks." The audience loved it. Then, like clockwork or karma wearing cheap perfume, Priscilla screeched into view in a beige rental SUV. The HOA crown apparently in the shop after last week's fence collision. She stepped out with a fresh stack of fake paperwork and the energy of someone who's never been told no by anyone but a mirror. "This is harassment," she shouted, already gesturing before her car door shut. Grandpa didn't flinch. "Ma'am," he said, tipping his hat with a tone that made the word sound like a legally binding warning, "you're on private land, mid-live-stream, carrying documents printed on the back of what looks like a deli menu." I zoomed the camera in as she waved her stack of nonsense like a malfunctioning flag. Her mouth moved faster than facts could keep up, and the chat started dropping popcorn emojis by the dozen. But then things escalated. She climbed back into the SUV, revved the engine like she was about to drive through logic itself, and floored it straight at the gate. It was the kind of move that makes you question everything you know about suburban conflict resolution. Grandpa calmly hit the sensor override button just as she hit the threshold. The gate snapped shut with mechanical grace, and her bumper collided with a sound that can only be described as justice with steel hinges. The radiator hissed like a deflated ego, and steam poured out like the HOA's credibility. Priscilla climbed out, blazer wrinkled, hair frazzled, and immediately began ranting on the hood of the car like she was auditioning for a courtroom drama nobody asked for. "This is destruction of property. This is war. This is... Her voice cracked under the weight of her own absurdity. Enter Ralph, stage left. He showed up carrying a folder like it held the gospel. "Got the real county records, Walt," he said, strolling up like a man handing in the final piece of a jigsaw puzzle. "Every plat line, survey, and easement since 1981. And spoiler alert, none of it belongs to the HOA." He handed the documents to Grandpa, who held them up like a winning lottery ticket for the camera. Meanwhile, Priscilla tried to spin a tale about outdated records and clerical errors, but the audience wasn't buying it. The chat exploded with comments like, "She drove through facts and still lost," and "Never seen someone try to ram a metaphor before." Every second of it streamed in real time, every frame capturing what happens when fake power crashes into actual boundaries. As Priscilla finally retreated to her dented rental, muttering about lawsuits that would never happen and standards that never existed, Grandpa turned to the camera, adjusted his hat, and said with a grin, "You just tried to run over the Constitution, and it pushed back." The crowd watching online erupted. In that moment, a toll booth became more than wood and wire. It became a symbol of resistance, of clarity, of someone finally saying no to being pushed around by plastic power. And believe me, if you thought that crash was the climax, you haven't seen what happens when an HOA queen finds herself dethroned by public opinion and a stack of county records. Stick around, because next, the neighborhood makes a choice, and it's louder than any fence. If you found this lesson or video helpful, please send it to a friend who's also dealing with the same kind of HOA headaches, or just someone who could use a laugh and a little reminder that standing your ground still matters. Share the story, spread the lesson, and let folks know that sometimes the toll booth isn't just a gate, it's a line in the sand. And hey, leave a comment and let me know what you think of this story. I'd love to hear your take. 3 days after the live stream, the official letter came like a soggy slice of humble pie. Priscilla Knox had resigned from her throne at the Crestwood Hollow HOA. The memo cited personal reasons and a desire to focus on self-care, which in HOA language probably means "I got caught printing zoning permits on deli paper and the neighborhood turned into a courtroom." The resignation vote wasn't even close. 3-1 against her. The HOA board, once silent as a prayer group with stage fright, suddenly found their voices and called for a full audit. And just like that, the woman who once ruled over porch colors and mailbox heights with an iron clipboard was gone. No banners, no farewell cookies, just silence and the sound of the gate still standing tall. With Priscilla out of the picture, the first thing to go was the infamous fence. Ralph organized the removal crew, and half the neighborhood volunteered before he finished the sentence. It came down faster than it went up, like it knew it didn't belong there in the first place. As each panel clanged into the dumpster, there was this collective exhale, like the whole neighborhood had been holding its breath since this nonsense started. And right where that gate once divided people, they built something new. A tall, handmade archway of cedar and oak, decorated with carvings of horses, stars, and the original toll booth receipt framed under glass. At the top, burned into the wood with care, were the words, "Walt's Gate, managed by Freedom." And let me tell you, seeing Grandpa standing in front of that gate, holding a mason jar of sweet tea and grinning like he'd just beat the system with a socket wrench, it was the kind of moment that made grown folks misty-eyed. During the little ceremony, the neighborhood kids presented him with a sign they'd made from reclaimed wood and glitter paint. Honorary Mayor of the Gate. It had hand-drawn horses, tiny smiling fences, and even a little SUV with a cartoon bumper bent in tribute to Priscilla's failed rebellion. Grandpa accepted it like it was a Nobel Prize, and maybe it should have been. Because in a world full of noise and nonsense, sometimes leadership looks like building your own toll booth and standing quietly behind it. The VIP passes? Oh, they became collectibles. People framed them. One neighbor turned hers into a keychain. Another laminated his and stuck it on the fridge like a family photo. What started as a workaround had become a badge of honor, a symbol of choosing community over control. And it wasn't about sides anymore, it was about what the gate meant. A reminder that one man, one voice, one stubbornly legal toll booth could shift an entire neighborhood's sense of what was possible. Maggie started working on a short documentary. Ralph began hosting weekend car meetups by the new arch. And the HOA? Well, they were still around, but suddenly they sounded a whole lot more like helpful neighbors and a lot less like small-town overlords. Later that evening, Grandpa leaned against the new wooden gate and watched the kids run laps around the pasture. "You know," he said, voice low but firm, "every tyrant leaves a monument. Ours left a fence. We turned it into a welcome sign." And that was it. No bragging, no speeches, just a man who'd built something out of stubbornness, love, and a deep respect for doing things the right way, even when it would have been easier to quit. But if you think the story ends with glitter signs and polite goodbyes, think again, because when one gate closes, some folks still try to sneak in through the back. And Priscilla? Well, let's just say she wasn't quite finished making noise. You'll want to hear how her final attempt to rewrite the ending backfired in front of the entire county. It happened at exactly 7:12 a.m. on a Tuesday. A rumbling U-Haul crept down Crestwood Hollow like it didn't want to wake the truth. Priscilla Knox, the former queen of covenants and clipboard crusades, loaded the last of her boxes with the quiet rage of someone who finally ran out of fake signatures and real supporters. She didn't say goodbye. Nobody offered a wave. The only thing that moved was the toll gate, clicking open and shut like a period at the end of a long, ridiculous sentence. If irony had a soundtrack, it would have played a slow banjo version of Another One Bites the Dust. Just like that, the woman who'd tried to rule through paper and fear left in silence. And the neighborhood? It exhaled. Maggie's exposé dropped the next day like a firecracker in a library. A full account of Priscilla's forged zoning letters, mysterious consulting fees, and scare tactics dressed up as policy. She'd done her homework. Me-mails, invoice trails, and even an anonymous tip from a former board member who'd finally grown a conscience. The local paper picked it up, the HOA forums melted down, and within 48 hours the county launched a formal investigation. That's the thing about lies. They don't just collapse. They ripple. They crack the ground they're built on, and once the cracks show, even the most carefully manicured lawn can't cover them up. What began as one man's standoff at a gate had become the spark that lit up a system running on unchallenged control. Grandpa kept the toll booth up, not out of spite, but as a kind of neighborhood monument. He called it symbolic operations only. People still dropped off $5 bills, now more like community support stickers than payment. He taped them to the booth wall, each one a thank you, a high five, a quiet declaration of, "We saw what you did, and we liked it." Some folks brought coffee instead. Others left notes. One kid brought a drawing of Walt's Gate with sparkles and stick horses and signed it, "Thanks for stopping the scary lady." And that's the thing. What he built wasn't just a gate. It was proof that you don't have to yell to be heard, that dignity can wear denim, that when a man chooses principle over pressure, others will follow. I stood next to that booth one evening as the sun settled soft over the hills, and I realized something. This was never about a driveway. Not really. It wasn't about HOA rules, red vests, or even fences. It was about keys. Who holds them, who gets locked out, and who decides what neighborhood actually means. Grandpa held the line not just for his own land, but for every neighbor who didn't know they were allowed to say no until he did. And somewhere between the gate clicks and the court dates, he taught all of us that HOA doesn't have to mean harass our ancestors. It can mean hold on accountability, or better yet, here's our alternative. So if you've made it this far, you know the lesson. Share this story with someone you know who's going through the same nonsense. Share it with that friend who's got a Priscilla in their cul-de-sac or a toll booth waiting to be built in their spirit. And leave a comment. Tell me what you think, what you'd do, what gate you'd stand behind. Because this story, it's not just ours, it's yours too. And hey, if you think Grandpa Walt should run for HOA president, hit that subscribe button. Because when power blocks the road, justice builds a toll gate. And just like that, the toll gate became more than wood, more than steel, more than a line drawn in stubborn gravel. It became a legacy. Grandpa didn't just win a land dispute, he reminded an entire neighborhood that silence isn't the same as peace, and that good people standing still is exactly how bad ideas take root. In a world where folks are told to just let it go or don't make waves, he built something that said, you can be firm without being cruel, you can be right without needing to shout, and you can push back without ever lifting a fist. That's real strength, and that's the kind of story worth telling. So what did we learn? We learned that power, when unchecked, always dresses itself up in forms, threats, and empty titles. But truth? Truth shows up in work boots with a blueprint and a boundary line. We saw that standing up doesn't require a spotlight. It just requires one person to say, no, not this time. And sometimes the people who seem quietest end up building the loudest message. Grandpa didn't fight for applause. He fought for decency. And because of that, we all walked away with something bigger than property lines. We walked away with clarity, courage, and a reason to believe that small standstill matter. If you felt that, if this story lit something up in you or reminded you of your own grandpa or your own battle with a system that forgot how to listen, please share this story. Send it to a friend, a neighbor, or someone who needs to know they're not alone in the fight. Leave a comment and let us know what part hit home. We'd love to hear your story too, and don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you never miss what's coming next, because if you think this was powerful, wait till you hear the next one. This was the story of Walter Kane and the toll gate that taught a town how to think for itself. And if that ain't worth $5 and a subscribe, I don't know what is. And before you go, what would you like me to do next? What kind of stories hit home for you? Stories about family standing strong, stories about neighbors standing up, tales of everyday folks beating the odds with nothing but grit and good sense. Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every one, and trust me, your ideas might just be the next story we bring to life. When we tell the stories you care about, everybody wins. So don't be shy, comment below, hit like if this one made you laugh or think, and subscribe so you never miss what's coming next, because the next gate we open together might just be yours.